I'm joined now in the studio by former General Secretary of the Unite Union, Len McCluskey. Len, lovely to see you this morning. Thank you for coming in. Let's have a chat about Starmer, because I know you're not his biggest fan and you have been quite critical of the Labour leader in the past. You rated him as poor in 2021. How do you rate him now?
Even poorer.
I mean, but he's so far ahead in the polls, Len.
Well, and I'm sure his advisors are telling him that he's doing the right thing. The problem is, of course, he's been attacking my wing of the Labour Party. I've been a member of the Labour Party for 54 years, the left wing of the party, expelling people and creating an atmosphere of fear within the Labour Party. That has brought about a terrible, terrible divide, which is not needed. Hang
on a minute, though, Len. Let's not rewrite history here, because wasn't it Jeremy Corbyn, your very close friend, the man with whom you've written this poetry book, which we'll be discussing in just a moment? Jeremy Corbyn's the one that divided the Labour Party, isn't he? He's the one who caused MPs like Luciana Berger, because she was Jewish, to leave the party. He left a huge legacy of anti-Semitism within the party that Starmer's done a good job of cleaning up.
That simply isn't true. I know the media have tried to produce this imagery of, under Corbyn, Labour was an anti-Semitic party. But even the HRC, who investigated Labour, and they were investigating an accusation that Labour was riddled with anti-Semitism, they found that that wasn't true.
You said it's the media. It was Jewish Labour MPs were saying it, weren't they?
No, I mean,
yes, they were.
Well, lots of
Luciana Berger was saying it. Margaret Hodge was saying it. Lots of Jewish Labour MPs. Ian Austin, who's got Jewish heritage.
Yes, but you're talking
These people had to leave the party.
Well, Camilla, you're talking about right-wing Labour MPs who had a specific agenda.
Jewish MPs, I think.
No, we're talking about right-wing Labour MPs who had an agenda to undermine the Corbyn leadership.
But why do you think Corbyn had a problem with Jewish Labour MPs leaving his party?
Because they were right-wing.
They were right-wing?
He had a problem with a number.
Luciana Berger was right-wing. She went and joined a Social Democrat party.
Let me answer your questions. It'll work better that way. The reality is that he had a problem with a number of right-wing MPs who sought to undermine his leadership. That's a reality. Now, of course, the whole anti-Semitism was examined and investigated by the HRC, and read their report. They made it clear that there was no inherent anti-Semitism within the Labour Party. Corbyn had condemned anti-Semitism. He's fought against anti-Semitism all his life.
OK, so he may have condemned anti-Semitism, and I did hear him repeatedly refer to himself as somebody who has fought racism all his life. Why didn't he condemn Hamas and Hezbollah? I mean, he must regret describing Hamas as friends now that he's seen them rape and murder 1,400 Israelis.
You'll have to bring Jeremy on your programme and ask him.
Should he regret it?
I've already condemned Hamas. I've condemned also the hypocrisy of everybody who wants to condemn one side but leaves Israel, the Israeli government, completely free from any condemnation, despite the fact that they break international law with the settlements in occupied territory. And what's going on in Gaza at the moment is just outrageous. It's slaughter. It's evil. And there's a saying that evil will only prosper. Evil will only prosper if good men and women stand silent. And I'll tell you this, Camilla, history will judge those who've been complicit in this evil and those who've stood on the sidelines and stayed silent.
But does any degree of sort of tragedy in Gaza justify projecting onto Big Ben the words "from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free," when it is so deeply offensive to Israeli and Jewish people?
The reality, of course, is that from the river to the sea is a slogan that seeks to create a Palestine that is viable, which is international law.
I think Jews and Israelis.
Well, when you say Jews,
wipe it from the map.
That isn't
river
true.
To the sea.
That isn't true, Camilla.
Because Hamas's founding statement wants to wipe Jews off the face of the earth,
Hamas doesn't speak for everyone. They certainly don't speak for all Jewish people, and they don't speak, for example, for the Palestine Authority. The reality of
Hamas are the Palestine Authority, though.
No, they're not. They're not.
So do you want Hamas to be deposed in Gaza?
I say that if we got rid of the settlements, the illegal settlements, and created a viable Palestine, which is international law, then Hamas would vanish anyway, because we would have a proper recognition. Let me put this to you. Our government believes in a two-state solution. If it's not just lip service, then why don't they recognise the state of Palestine now? I've been listening to David Cameron with some interesting comments.
Hamas because they're prescribed terrorists to down their weapons, and they want the hostages to be freed immediately. I mean, surely you support that, Len?
Absolutely, 100%. I also support what international law has been saying for over 50 years, condemning Israel for the occupation of settlements that are illegal.
We can take your point on settlements.
I would just ask you and your viewers...
But of course they haven't occupied Gaza since 2005.
To look at the map. The map that was drawn up in 1947, the map that was drawn up in 1967, supported by international law of what Israel is and what Palestine is. Look now at that map.
When Israel left Gaza in 2005, they left them with the infrastructure to really make something great of that country. We've had claims of genocide, which don't seem to be borne out in the population statistics for Gaza and indeed that area, because, of course, the population has gone up. So all of this talk about Israeli occupation, I take your point on settlements, but the Israelis haven't been there in almost 20 years, have they?
Camilla, you cannot take my point on settlements and just leave it at that.
No, but
let's have a proper
point,
debate.
Isn't it?
No, let's
because there's lots of Israelis and Jews that don't think there should have been settlements.
Oh, okay? Absolutely.
So I think we can talk about that.
By the way, both here in Britain, all Jewish, in fact, the majority of the Jewish community here in Britain, I think, are appalled at the slaughter that's taken place.
When you said you have in Mossad the most sophisticated organisation in the world, much more so than MI5, MI6, CIA, are we really led to believe that they didn't know this was happening? What do you mean by that? That you think that Mossad knew that the October the 7th attacks were going to happen?
There is a conspiracy theory, not that I particularly support it. That said, the idea that Mossad, and the Egyptians, of course, say that they told Mossad something was happening, and that the idea that Mossad, this highly sophisticated security system, didn't know was happening is difficult to believe.
But then you're veering into the territory of that conspiracy theory of suggesting that the Israelis knew about October the 7th and let it happen so that they could then attack Gaza.
That's precisely...
You don't buy into that, do you?
No, and that's precisely why you've quoted something that I was making the point that people are raising that issue. They're also raising the issue that did Hamas not know that that type of an attack was going to bring the incredible response from Israel in the way that it is, i.e. Hamas playing games as well. There's all kinds of issues. What I do know is that there are thousands and thousands of women and children being slaughtered at the moment in Gaza.
Yes.
And we're standing round playing games in Parliament about procedures.
Well, actually, there's a report today to say that they may be quite close to a 6-week ceasefire.
Yes, well,
and also there are women, aren't there, in Gazan tunnels, Hamas tunnels, who are probably still being raped and tortured as we speak.
The reality is that the only way to resolve this issue is for the international community, in particular America and Britain, to insist that Netanyahu, almost an international criminal himself, dismantles the settlements, withdraws to the 1967 Green Line and allows the creation of a Palestinian viable state. That's the way to resolve it.
You said at the beginning of the conversation you thought it was wrong for the likes of Corbyn and I assume also Abbott, McDonald to be expelled from the Labour Party. Would you like to see them back in then?
Of course. I
mean, so if there's a sort of left-wing caucus that tries to challenge Starmer either now or if he becomes Prime Minister, will you lend them your support? Would you like to depose Starmer?
It's not a question of deposing Starmer. It's a question about Starmer has been elected on a radical programme that he's completely ditched now. He fooled everyone. untruthful. The reality is, what kind of Labour government do we want? We want one that changes for the good of ordinary working people.
I know, but that Labour government that was proposed by Jeremy Corbyn was spectacularly annihilated in the 2019 election.
Well, don't rule out 2017. 13 million people voted for Corbyn.
But
more people, Camilla.
More people wanted Boris Johnson to be Prime Minister than Jeremy Corbyn.
Here's an interesting fact for you. More people voted for Jeremy Corbyn in England than voted for Tony Blair. The fact of the matter is that 2019 was all about Brexit.
What are you saying?
Else.
You object to Starmer because you think he's some sort of Thatcherite?
Well, there's no doubt that he's been captured by the establishment and the right wing of the party, and he won't do anything for ordinary working people.
Len, let's just have a quick word about this book. Very briefly, Len, you've written this book with Jeremy Corbyn, so you're both poets, or at least admirers of poetry.
We're very much admirers of poetry, and this is an effort to say to people, look, poetry is not just for posh people, it's for everyone. So embrace poetry because it's got a fantastic emotional pull.
I can agree with you on that. Len McCluskey, thank you very much indeed for coming in this morning. Really lovely to speak to you.